Being here, and with that, I'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. And I'll do that. And I just was saying how dapper our CEO looked tonight. I was just wanted to bring everybody's attention to that.
Because it won't embarrass him at all.
No. Well, he should. I mean, people should get commended and recognized for dressing so well on a council night.
Last time I did that.
No, I think now you've set a standard, you'll have to continue to meet that.
I think he took lessons.
So I will call, I have an amendment to the agenda, just one, so I'll ask for a motion to amend the agenda, unless Ethan has something to add. And the amendment is just to 174.23, and keeping our motions regarding code of conduct consistent. So I just gathered the words out of our March 24th meeting, and I've given them to Luana, and she's made the correction, just that all our motions should be consistent when we're dealing with those things. And after that, that's the only amendment I made.
That's to the agenda? No, that's to the minutes.
Okay, I'll do that when we get to the minutes then. So everybody will be ready for that then. I'm sorry. I was way ahead of myself. Just thinking adoption of the agenda, adoption of the minutes, it's got to be the same. Yes?
I'll make the motion to accept the agenda as presented.
As presented, thank you. So there aren't any amendments, I'm going to amend the minutes. So you guys watch for that. I'll call the vote then, all in favor? That's carried. All right, we are pleased to welcome two delegations tonight. The first being our auditors from MMP LLP, and that's Melissa Milne and Nicole McAndrew, and I'll ask them to come to the mic. They've been here before, I believe. And the audit is in our package, in the agenda package, plus, well, that's where you'll have to find it because it's a lot of pages. And so if you haven't read it yet, please do, but we have Nicole and Melissa here to present. So go ahead, turn on your mic, and you have the floor.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here. So what I'm going to go through with you is our audit findings report. So it's the one that looks like this, and I'm just going to do a really high-level overview. If you've read it ahead of time and you have questions, please feel free to ask your questions, but basically I'll just touch on the high points for you this evening. So I'm actually going to start right after the table of contents on page 1 with the introduction. So the purpose of this audit findings report is to assist you as members of council in your review of the results of our audit. We're substantially completed the audit at this point, and we're prepared to sign our independent auditor's report subsequent to the completion of just a few outstanding items. And those outstanding items really can't be completed until today, which is why they're not done yet. So we'll have to follow up on with the lawyers just to make sure that nothing has happened since we last communicated with them. We get a signed management representation letter that's dated the same day that the statements are approved, which is why that one's waiting as well. We do check with council if there's any subsequent events that would impact the financial statements. So if it's okay, I'll just take a moment now to see if you're aware of anything that would impact the financial statements. No? Okay. Thank you. And finally, the review and approval of the actual financial statements by council. So once that's all done, then we'll be signing our auditor's report. And when we get a little further into the package, you'll see that our report is in there for your review, and it is a clean audit this year. On page 2, so the next few pages, basically, there's just a list of some items that what we sometimes say is no news is good news, and in this case we have no news. So changes from the audit service plan. So when I was here earlier in the year and presented what we were going to do for the audit, there was no deviations from that. So we did carry out the audit as planned. There was no significant limitations placed on the scope or timing of our audit. What that means is basically everything we asked for was provided, everyone we asked to talk to, we were able to talk to, so that was really great. No instances of fraud or suspected fraud came to our attention during the course of our audit. There was no evidence of non-compliance with laws and regulations, and there were no matters arising in connection with related parties. So then on to page 3. Our audit process focuses on understanding the controls utilized in management's reporting systems, and while our assessment was not intended to be sufficient to comment or conclude on the sufficiency of all internal controls, and we may not be in fact aware of some weaknesses that do exist, we can say that the controls that we looked at, we didn't notice any weaknesses that we needed to report back to council. At this time, we formally acknowledge the cooperation and assistance we receive from management and staff of the town. The first year audits can be more time consuming than other years just because we're getting to know the town of Didsbury and getting to know processes. So everyone was really wonderful to work with, provided information and support. So we are very thankful for that. There were no significant matters discussed with management that in our judgment need to be brought to your attention. And there were just a few proposed adjustments that we didn't feel were material, so therefore we just kept a list of them, and you'll see that a little further in my package. The materiality that I proposed at our planning meeting was $285,000, which was the same that was used last year, and we didn't have to change that at all, so that was the materiality carried out throughout the audit. On to page 4. We feel the accounting policies used by the town are appropriate and have been consistently applied. The disclosures made in the notes to the financial statements are clear, neutral, and consistent with our understanding of the town and the amounts presented in the financial statements. Some other matters noted here, just as for your information kind of a section. Next year, there's a new handbook section coming out with respect to asset retirement obligations. So this is just kind of a heads up that this will come into play next year. Every municipality is subject to this, so it's not just for the town of Didsbury. And then the second item here I have listed is, you'll see on the financial statements when we review the statements that land held for sale is showing as a financial asset. One of the requirements for that presentation is an expectation of when the land will be sold, and so we'll revisit this each year to make sure that it meets the requirement. And if it for some reason doesn't meet the requirement, then it'll just move down to non-financial asset. It's still its own line. It's just a possible presentation change in the future. But for now, it's what you're used to seeing. Page 5 just refers to our management representation letter, which is attached further in the report for you, and our auditor's independence. So at various points throughout the audit, we're required to confirm that MNP is independent of the town of Didsbury and therefore able to carry out the audit. So our actual letter is attached for you further in the package. Page 6 is Appendix A, and it speaks to our audit process. We did a pretty thorough overview of what our process was at the onset of the audit, so I won't go through this in great detail with you. We did carry it out as planned. But I will again repeat tonight that during the course of our audit, we examined on a test basis evidence supporting the amounts and disclosures made in the statements. We assessed the accounting principles used and significant estimates made by management. We obviously needed to obtain an understanding of the town, processes and controls and whatnot. We reviewed and assessed the accounting systems necessary to support our audit opinion. We evaluated the overall financial statement presentation, and we do the subsequent events review with management and council. In Appendix B on page 7, this is just how we addressed the areas that we felt were higher risk areas of the audit. So the first two is deferred revenue and restricted contributions, and then government transfers, which is the grants. These two first two items go hand in hand. So for both of them, we obtained grant agreements and reviewed them for our understanding of any spending restrictions on those grants, and made sure that the costs applied were reasonable. And then we also determined if the grant should be recognized as spent or if it should be deferred. So we look at agreements and the purpose of the grants to make sure that it's presented appropriately on the financial statements. For the expenses, specifically the subcontractors, we get an understanding of your procurement policies. And then as we're auditing expenses and capital purchases, we just make sure that those procurement policies are followed. And then lastly, we do journal entry testing, and we have a set criteria that we looked at various journal entries, and there were no concerns with that procedure. Appendix C, I had mentioned earlier in my presentation about some proposed adjustments that we just keep track of but don't actually post. These are below materiality, so we don't feel that they're impacting the financial statement, so we just keep track of them. The very first line is actually your last year's auditor's adjustments reversing. The majority of that $163,000 is the consolidation of the library within your statements and then the sick day accrual. So that's what that first line is. We kind of just added them all up together for you. The second line is this year's estimated sick leave accrual. So what that's saying is if we had actually posted that liability, your liabilities would have increased by $97,000. Again, the library consolidation journal entry, and then right near the end of the audit, some information came in about the RCMP retroactive pay. So rather than recording that and having to redo all the statements, which can be quite time consuming, we just noted it as a liability that will get picked up the next year. So if we had posted all of these, you can see that the earnings amount would have changed by $61,000. And so when we're comparing that to materiality, that's how we can come to the conclusion that it's okay that these aren't done. Any questions on that?
Just a quick one. It's been a while since I've done counting. So the
Mr.
61...
Moore, do you want to ask a question?
Pardon me?
Ask a question.
Yeah, sorry. Chair.
Go ahead.
Through the chair. Is that 61,372? Is that revenue? Like, is revenue's always in brackets, or is that reducing the revenue?
That would have been an increase to revenue.
Thank you.
Yes,
So
thank
it is,
you.
yeah.
Yes.
I haven't forgotten it all.
Yeah, no. MMP does the debit credit presentation. Other firms will do an over-under, which I personally prefer the debit credit, so the credit would be an increase. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next few pages is just the actual details of the items that I just summarized. So it's very tiny font, I apologize. We'll just move on past that. The next attachment is our independent auditor's report. So as I mentioned initially, it is a clean audit. Basically, we're saying that the statements are fairly stated in accordance with public sector accounting standards. The one item that you would not have seen on your previous auditor's report is the very last two paragraphs before our signature. It says report on other legal and regulatory requirements, where we speak to the debt limit, and the supplementary accounting principles and standards regulation is the wages note where we disclose wages. So it is a requirement that this be in our audit report, but I did notice it wasn't on your last year's, so new but required. The management representation letter is attached. That's the letter from the town of Didsbury to MMP. That just basically puts in writing the accounting policies followed in the preparation of the financial statements. It's a little long, so I will leave that for you to look through. And lastly, our independence communication is just the written letter that says MMP is independent and able to carry out the audit. And I believe that's the package.
Page did you end on? Page. page did you?
Are you looking at the one on the table?
No, I'm looking at the one in my packet.
In the, sorry.
You want to ask that, Amanda?
Sure, the one in your package was out of order when it was put in. That's why we put the copy on your table. So, I apologize for that.
Okay. All right, now I see it. All right, so I think that we'd like to take questions. Councillor McCoy?
I'm just curious. I have some questions, but I'm not sure they'd be answered, could be answered, or should be answered later by staff or by you. And I know you won't stay the whole time, so I'll mention them. Is that all right? And for it to be answered by staff, that we can defer it to the CAO report or the financial, the approval of the financial statement.
Yep.
On note 3.
So do this is always the last question and anybody else has some?
So in note 3, current taxes receivable increased by 100,000 over the last year, and that's a 35% increase. I just was curious what your thoughts. Is that significant or not?
I think we'll defer that to administration for when we're, do you want to answer that now, or do you want to, I'd like the questions to be for our auditors, and then when we go to the agenda item, administration can answer anything else.
Yeah, so just in follow-up to the auditor's presentation, Amanda was then going to present the financial statement, and so it's kind of related to that, and then,
And then we'll vote.
so I'd recommend that maybe all the questions come after that, because they're kind of all parts of the same.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, sorry.
Is that wrote somewhere?
Can I ask?
No.
Okay. So we have a presentation from MFP, and now Amanda would like to talk about. I know, but I'm still talking to administration here. So can you explain that again? Ethan?
Yeah, so sorry, in that opening paragraph there for the presentation, it says that followed by a financial statement presentation by administration. So this is just in follow-up, and it's related to that.
So she's gonna enhance or endorse or
Yeah.
qualify.
Which will address some of those questions.
Okay. All right, so go ahead then.
Thank you, and sorry for the confusion. This is our first year actually for administration preparing the financial statements. And so since they are our financial statements, we're presenting them, and then I've asked them to say, in case you have any questions for either of us after my presentation, then they'll be here to answer those as well.
Okay.
So I'll just go through them pretty briefly, but feel free to ask us questions on any of the items. If you go to page 32 of
At the end of your presentation,
sure.
we'll be asking
Yes.
questions.
Yeah.
All right.
So page 32 of the financial statements is of the package tonight is the financial statements, title page. So we'll just go down to page 34, which is the first financial statement. That's the statement of financial position. And the statement of financial position represents our financial assets and liabilities at a point in time. So in our case, it's December 31st of 2022, and that's our year end. The statement expresses two key performance measures. It's our ability to finance our operations and to provide future services. So the first section is net financial assets, and that is made up of financial assets, which are resources that we control and can use to pay what we owe to others. And we ended the year with about 8.56 million in cash and a total of financial assets of just over $13 million. And then financial liabilities are obligations to outside parties at year end, and they result in past transactions and events that will lead to future sacrifice, usually cash, from our financial assets. So those include included at year end about 1.1 million in accounts payable, deferred revenue of 2.8 million, and long-term debt of 2.65 million. And the net financial assets is the net of our financial assets and financial liabilities. And when our financial assets exceeds the liabilities, which is what we have here, that puts us in the net financial asset position. The town's net financial assets increased by about $1 million, largely resulting from the excess of revenue over expenses, or what you might refer to as net income, that occurred this year. This change can be described in further detail on page 5 of the draft financial statements, and that's called the statement of change in net financial assets. So the bottom section of this statement is the non-financial assets, and for a municipality like ourselves, the largest portion of that is our tangible capital assets. Our tangible capital assets have had an increase in investment net of amortization of about $330,000. And renewal of our TCA, or tangible capital assets, is something that is looked at by municipal affairs in completing a viability review for municipalities. In financial accounting, the entire cost of our assets are recorded here initially, and then each year a portion of the asset is amortized and the remaining amount stays as a non-financial asset to represent the remaining service potential of our assets. And then this brings us down to accumulated surplus at the bottom of the page. This number represents the net of all assets and liabilities of the town, or the economic position from all years' operations. So this is the number. This is all of the town's past operating surpluses or deficits. And currently the town is in an accumulated surplus position of $69.1 million, an increase of $1.46 million from the previous year. And it's our net positive resources which could be used to provide future services. If you go down to page 35 of the agenda package, this is our statement of operations, which is a picture of our revenue and expenses for the year. So this is like an income statement, and it explains the change in accumulated surplus from the prior year. And it also shows a comparison of budgeted to actual results. The budget on this statement is based on financial reporting versus when we see it in our budget document, that's on a cash basis budget that is in accordance with the MGA. So in order to reconcile that to our budget documents, there's a note in the financial statements, which is note 23. And if you look at that note, we do balance to our zero, which is what we would expect for our budget. So I won't go into too much detail comparing the differences between actual and budget results, because I've done that in detail in the quarter 4 financial report. But looking here, the revenues of the town, the largest is from property taxes of 4.9 million. Sales and user fees is also one of our largest, and government transfers, combined the operating transfers and capital, which is found in the section below. So we totaled 11.68 million in revenue for the year. Expenses are laid out by department, and to show the readers what was spent in the year on those functional areas. Expenses include amortization of 2.25 million and totaled 12.28 million for the year. So as I noted in the section called Other, you'll see the government transfers or government grants for capital projects that happened in the year. And that was just over $2 million. And then A loss on disposal of tangible capital assets, which is also an accounting, financial reporting line item of $38,000, giving us a total of excess of revenue over expenses of $1.46 million. So that amount, 1.46, equals the increase from your first the first statement that I showed you, the increase in accumulated surplus for the year. Therefore, the revenues in the year were sufficient to cover the expenses. Moving down to page 37 of the agenda, it's the statement of cash flows. And this statement gives a snapshot of how the town generated cash to meet its requirements in the year. These transactions can be operating, capital, investing, or financing. Under capital activities, you can see that the town's, the total from operating is 3.39 million. And then going into capital, we spent 2,622,000 on acquisition of capital assets. And in the investing activities, we saw an increase of about $78,000, which was from the collection of loans receivable, mainly relating to a mortgage that was collected on in the year. And then under the financing transactions, we did not take on any new debt, but we did pay down $544,000 in debt. This brings us to a change in cash, non-externally restricted cash of about $700,000. Now, moving on, pages 38, and again, these are newly formatted financial statements, so if you're comparing them to last year, they do look a bit different. One difference is that we have our segmented information in Schedule 1 and our tangible capital assets in Schedule 2, and in the previous year, those were both those were notes to the financial statements. And both of those give a detailed look at the segmented information is a detailed look at revenues and expenses by departments, and the tangible capital asset schedules show all the ins and outs, what happened with our assets during the year. So what we purchased, what we disposed of, and the amortization on those items. So the notes are an important part of the financial statements, and in order to interpret the financial statements, you should read them as a whole, including the notes. And those start on page 41 of the agenda package, with a summary of accounting policies. And then beginning at note 2, we go into more detail on what we saw on the statement of financial position and the statement of operations. So I'll go into a few of these in more detail, just to point out a couple of things. So note 2 is our cash and cash equivalents. And as you can see, this is at a point in time, so at December 31st, 2022, we had about $8.6 million in cash. So only about $1 million of that was in our current account, and the remainder was in our savings accounts, which is made up of both reserves and grant money. And further to that, in the current account, about $240,000 was externally restricted by the parties that they related to. The town does have a line of credit, an authorized line of credit of $1 million. However, we did not draw on that at any time during 2022. Moving on to note 3 is taxes and grants in place of taxes. So this is a receivable, our tax is receivable, at a point in time. And yes, this amount was higher than 2021. I turned over my notes page. Looking at kind of the 5-year average of taxes receivable, this amount wasn't abnormally high though. So, and the other thing about taxes receivable is that it is considered kind of lower risk, as there are processes in place by the MGA which require payment and allow us to collect. In the worst case would be a tax sale of the property. Note 4 is our trade and other receivables, and that's showing our grants receivable, which were lower than the previous year, and that's just because of what we had received from the government at that point in time. Utilities receivable was actually a little bit lower than the previous year, showing that the collection of those is pretty normal. And then note 5 is called loans receivable. And this note outlines our loans that, or notes that we have out to various entities. The first line there is the mortgage receivable, and that was previously in default, and we did collect the full balance of that in 2022. I'll now talk about notes 9 and 10, which relate to long-term debt and then our debt limit. So like I mentioned, long-term debt is, we did not take on any new debt in the year, and we just made regularly scheduled payments of about $544,000. And on page 51, note 10 is the debt limit. So this, again, is required under the MGA that we don't exceed our debt limit, and which is a calculation based on revenue of the municipality. So, and then subtracting what debt we do have outstanding. So our unused debt limit at December 31st was $14,873,000, which is about 18% of the total allowed. And then the debt servicing limit available was $2,274,000, which is about 28% of the limit. So overall, quite a bit of room under both of those calculations. Moving on to page 21 is note 12, accumulated surplus. So accumulated surplus, remember this was on our statement of financial position, the first statement I talked about, that bottom number totaling 69.1 million. And so it's made up of equity, intangible capital assets, unrestricted surplus, and restricted surplus. The equity intangible capital assets represents the amounts that the town has invested in capital or in infrastructure for future services. And the restricted surplus represent our reserve accounts for future capital or future operating expenditures. And the inflows and outflows from those are approved by council either through the budget or a resolution of council or a bylaw. And then the remaining amount is unrestricted surplus. So that we did see that reduce from 2021, and that is just because the amounts flowing into the restricted surplus, the amounts flowing into equity and tangible capital assets were larger than our net, our excess of revenue over expenses for the year. There are quite a few other notes just describing various parts of the financial statements, but which I encourage you to take a look at. But lastly, I'll refer you to note 26, which is the last note, and it is saying that council and management have approved these financial statements. These are still in draft form, so we haven't, so that is what we're looking for tonight, is council's approval of the financial statement. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to the mayor to facilitate questions, and like I said, I'm available to answer questions, and so are our auditors from NMB.
All right. Thanks for that, Amanda. And I will take questions, and I just remind everybody to speak. Your hand goes up. You're recognized by the chair, and then please speak. Councillor Moore.
I would just like to say how much I appreciate the extra detail. And like Schedule 1 and 2, I have never seen that before. And I was impressed by it when I first saw it. Now I find out that our administration did that. And so I'm very impressed. And I'd like to thank them for that.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for that comment. The questions, Councillor McCoy?
Through the chair, Note 12, the restricted surplus accounts, do we have a policy for each one of those regarding how the funds are transferred in and out, and are all of those still required? It seems like a lot.
Should I just defer these all to Amanda?
Through the chair, we do have a reserve policy that we've discussed previously, that we do need to spend some time updating that, as there's been new accounts or new reserves that aren't listed in there at this point. As far as how many there are, there's definitely a way to change how we're reserving money and look at what we're reserving it for, and maybe making certain reserves more broad, and so they would encompass more things. But that would definitely be council's prerogative. And as far as the inflows and outflows, typically if something's approved by budget, then it can occur. And if it's happening outside of the budget process, then we would have a resolution from council to approve those amounts.
Thank you. Can I ask an additional one about the same item?
Yeah, go ahead.
And it may be the auditors that have to answer through the chair. Is the 7.07 approximately million fully funded in the unrestricted funds in the bank?
No, it's not. There's a portion of the funds that are not cash funded, but those other financial assets, which can be translated into cash, would cover that in the event that you would need all of the cash.
Okay. And may I have to ask, this is all to do with the same thing? Should they be fully funded? And I think through the chair, I'd like to ask the auditors about that.
Oops. Thank you. I'd have to give that some thought. I think if there's a way to access the cash, like Amanda said, then it doesn't necessarily need to be cash sitting there. Yeah.
Thank you. Through the chair, again, my last question on this item. Can you tell me what the shortfall is?
I don't have that in front of me, but it's, we can bring it back. And it's always reported in the quarterly financials as well on the reserve schedule.
Okay. I think what I'll do, in fairness to our auditors, is we'll take questions to the auditors, and we have the item coming up later to approve the financial or the audit and the statements. So if there's any questions for the auditors at this point, Councillor Baswick?
Thank you, Mayor. My main thing is to, it's actually a comment to thank the auditors. They're new to us, and I think they did a very detailed and heads-down job of our audit, and kudos to them, and also to the support from our professionals in administration. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Other questions? I have a question, and I've got it on the agenda. Let me find the page. Since I'm confused on two packages now, so I apologize. Bear with me. It's actually in the letter from the CEO's letter. Can you bring that up? I'm finding the page. I'm getting there. Okay. Well, I had it highlighted. Do you have can you tell me where your letter is in here, Ethan?
Yeah, it's 22.
What page?
33.
Yeah, page 22, you said?
That's on the computer, the package that you brought.
Start contacting you.
So I can ask it later since Ethan will be able to answer it. I have it noted on page 33. There, that helps me when I look at my own notes. So on page 33, it does reference, in the third paragraph, and I guess, I'm going to ask this during our agenda item meeting because it's not for our auditors. But the auditors might have a comment on it, maybe is why I'm going to ask. I think I'll ask. In the third paragraph, it talks about, and it goes on, are composed entirely of neither management nor employees of the county. Is that just a typo? Okay. Thank you. I thought for some reason I missed something in this, but we'll correct that. It was just for more clarification because I got reading that shows I read it. But thanks for that. And then I can ask, I don't have any more from the auditors. Well, I do have one, and that is, there's a lot of preamble and a lot of disclaimers. And it says even on page 5 that this document can't be quoted. So is that, what is that referencing? That it can't be quoted? On page 5. It's 5 of your preamble. You get away from, do you want to answer that now, or do you know what I'm talking referencing?
Thank you, Mayor. I am not sure specifically, but generally when it comes to our report, it's addressed to council. And so it's intended for council, which is why we ask that it not be shared outside of council, even though this is a public meeting, but it is addressed to council.
Right, and so after we approve it tonight or accept as presented, That's just a pre-presentation disclaimer or statement.
This report,
Since it'll be a public. Is it?
well,
We're
our,
talking about two different things then, so maybe I'm answering my own question.
We're talking about the information you're sending to council in the letter and then and information we need prior to the audit being presented, and then the audit is a different document that isn't referenced in it. So I think I answered my own question. Do that sometimes.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions for the auditors? All right, then, I will thank Michelle and Nicole for being here with us tonight. I believe, if I find my agenda items, I have a motion to thank you for the presentation. And anything you'd like to add before you go? Pretty much.
Just thank you so much. Like I said, the first year can be a challenging year, but from our perspective, we thought it went quite smoothly, and we always appreciate the help from management. So thank you.
And then being a new year might be why there's so much new information for us to absorb, and so many new, I mentioned it, reference and disclaimers, and there are a lot more pages in there now. Maybe that's just newer and based on so many changes over the past years. But thank you very much. It was very well done, and we appreciate that. I believe our staff felt the same, and I won't speak for them, but I'm sure they've told you that. I would believe that. Deputy Mayor?
I move that council thank the representatives from MNP LLP for their presentation of the 2022 audit findings report and audited financial statements.
All right, I'll call the vote then. All in favor? And thank you again. Councillor McCoy?
Mayor, would it be appropriate to make a motion to have the funding on the restricted surplus to come back to the next meeting? The cash?
No, right now, no. We do that during the agenda item.
Okay.
All right. We have the Didsbury Golf Club with us this evening. Not the whole club. We have Shelley, I believe, is going to come up and speak, and Norm. Oh, Brian? Brian too. You don't look like Shelley.
Nope.
Well,
I asked them if they were coming up front, and they said they'd support me from back there.
See? So we have Brian Whittle here then, with some backing behind him. So everything you say has to be absolutely on point, because you have 3 witnesses there. And Brian, so what is your role then with the club now?
Is this on? Okay, there we go. Okay, well, good evening. Yeah, my name's Brian Whitall. I'm one of the directors with the golf club now, have been for just over the past year. And of course, like I said, yeah, Rick and Shelley and Norm are also members of the board of directors. We have a group that it ranges from year to year from about 8 to 12 people on the board of directors, all volunteers that are on that board to try to, I guess, keep the operations at the golf course moving smoothly and progressing. What we wanted to do tonight was to come to council for a couple of reasons. First one that I believe is on the agenda for later on, item 8.2, is in regards to the tennis courts that are up there. A number of years back, it was brought to council and it was approved that 2 of those tennis courts, the ones on the west side, were then, I guess, given to the golf course to be able to utilize for cart storage up there and everything else, because the courts had not been used that great. And then the 2 to the east, which were the better courts, were left there for residents to utilize if they wanted to. Over the last number of years, of course, those courts have fallen into further disrepair because of the age of those courts and with those trees around them. If you go there now, there's a couple of nice little 10, 12-foot trees growing out in the middle of them and things like that. So they're pretty much non-functional the way they are. And I guess the request that we were coming to council with was about being able to get access to those two courts as well, because what we would like to do is set up some facilities there, some structures inside that fenced area for either storing more carts or for moving some of our maintenance equipment up there and storing it there so that we can get rid of some of the older maintenance sheds that are down at the corner there when you come into the golf course and stuff in, well, what we call, I guess some people call Shantytown. We got the main maintenance building there and then about 3 or 4 other little sheds that are getting fairly old, and of course, but they're storing our mowers and sprayers and all that equipment, and we would like to put that equipment under shelter, and we feel that with that fenced area there and everything else, it would be a very appropriate place to do it. It's sort of out of the way, it's protected, and if we put some structures in there that we can put the equipment under, it'll work quite well. Plus then at least we're utilizing that space, and it's not just sitting there vacant the way it is. So that's the first, I guess, request. Maybe quickly what I'll do too is just give you a little bit of a background. The last couple of years, like COVID with everything, is not been easy on anybody. And at the golf course too, we certainly did see that, memberships were down and others coming out to the course to play and things like that didn't help. But I mean, over the years, we've ranged from, I think like last year we were, 332 members. The year prior to that, we were in that just shy of 400 members and things. So, I mean, the numbers have been, fairly consistent. The one thing we've seen that has improved, like 2 years ago, our juniors were 160 of those almost 400 members. This past year, we had 130 that were juniors. One of the focuses that the club has had is on trying to, of course, evolve and develop the junior program for our kids in the community and the surrounding area. Give them something else that, to take on for sport activity and things like that. And it's worked quite well. And we've focused a fair bit of work around the club at that with putting in junior tee boxes on the golf course, building up and enhancing our practice green and tee area that we have there now. We're doing more work on that this year. Everything else just to give them more opportunity to, hone those skills and want to come up there and golf. And try to develop them into long-term members for the golf course is the big key there, of course, because like everything else, all of us members are slowly aging out, and we see that every year. So that's something that's a reality that we have to work with. Secondly, I guess the big thing that we thought we wanted to bring to council's attention is that the lease that we currently have with the town, it was back in 1985 when it was drawn up. It was a 42-year lease, so it is coming up due here in 27. And it's something that we felt, well, we need to sit down at some point in time and start a conversation with council in regards to that. Now, in that lease, paragraph 7 of that, it has a renewal in there for a further 50 years, is what was in the original lease. But in that, it also says too that, upon council deeming that, that I guess both sides have kept up to their part of the lease and everything else. And so we thought it'd be a good opportunity for the golf club and council, whether it be a committee of council and administration, that we get together and are able to then, show you and itemize all the things that over the years that at the golf course that we have done as far as repairs to buildings, repairs to the grounds, some of the changes that we've done there, equipment upgrades, all these different kinds of things that have been done to try to build that golf course and maintain it appropriately, to try to ensure that our members want to come and play there and that people from outside find it attractive and want to come and play at our course. And that's always a challenge because, of course, we live and die on our members and on the membership fees, and we can't continue to raise those because the majority of them are very price sensitive in that regards. And like I said, with our juniors being, not quite half of our members, we keep their fees at very, very affordable rates for them to be able to come and play. So it's like I said, every year we're running pretty lean and mean, and we always have things that we'd like to do. And for example, going forward now, probably one of the biggest ones that we're going to have is to look at what we're going to do as far as an irrigation system on the golf course. Right now, the only place where we do have sprinklers is either on the greens themselves or on the tee boxes is also. The fairways, the only way we can do that is dragging hoses around and watering with hoses and things like that. So it's a fairly antiquated system. It needs some upgrading to the system, to the pumps, a number of different things like that. So it's one of these things that we need to start looking at to see, well, what makes the most sense? Where do we start? If we start with putting in new pumps, well, we got to make sure that if we're doing that it's going to fit into whatever future system we're going to evolve for the golf course. And is it just going to be greens and tee boxes, or if you're running pipes everywhere, do you do it across the fairways to make it a little more efficient? Those kinds of things. But what we hear from talking to others, I mean, you're in the tune of $200,000 to $250,000 for doing something like that. Well, on a public course like ours, with what we generate on an annual basis, that's really not something that's very feasible. So it's one of those things that down the road we got to try to do some planning for. And some of the things we're doing right now, as far as upgrading greens and everything else, it takes a fair bit of money to do those, even just to change a green or taking down some of those trees. I mean, and we know, just like in town here, the trees, the age of those trees, they're coming to end of life, and they need to be taken down and they need to be replaced and those kinds of things. And it all costs money to maintain and keep it looking good. To do a lot of these things, I guess, we want to know that, is the lease going to continue? Is there any concerns that the town has about signing off and allowing that lease to continue? Because if there is, then investing monies into that course right now when the lease is coming due in 4 years maybe isn't the best thing for us as a executive to look at for the golf course. So that's why, like I say, we want to start the conversation with the town, see where things at that in regards to the lease, and go from there. And give you an update as to where things are at, what we would like to do, where we think maybe there's opportunity for the town and the golf course to work a little bit better together with on some of the maintenance issues that we have, roads and gates and things like that need some repair. Because trying to get into that golf course right now, if you haven't tried going up that road, I suggest if you do, make sure you get your seatbelt on and put a mouth guard in and go for a drive up to the golf course. It needs some help. And I mean, that's the first impression when somebody drives up there and things like that. So those are some of the key things that we have before us, I guess, that we would like to start planning for in the future. And we do, for example, here we did a casino this last year, and of course, like every other volunteer organization, you do those once every 3-4 years, and you get some funding, which helps us. But $20,000 doesn't go very far when you're replacing trees or replacing a green or doing something different on the tee box or replacing a mower that's $70,000, these kinds of things. So we figured it's a good opportunity to start a dialogue. But part of, like I said, of what we want to do as far as enhancing down there would be around the tennis courts, getting access to those so that then we can build structures in there and then clean up our maintenance area there, just again, so that looks a lot more appealing for our members and or others that come to the golf club. With that, I don't know anything else. I don't think that we were really wanting to cover off on. It was just more to make a suggestion that, at council's convenience, whenever the time is right, we have, I think, ample time here going forward to be able to sit down and go through some of this. But we what we want to do is then build on a list, because we've been sitting around and saying, well, okay, we got to try to think back here, like, and even just say the last 10 years. What are some of the major projects that we've done at the golf course, like the water heaters in the clubhouse, re-roofing the clubhouse and the main house at the golf club, changing the, what do we have, the canals there. We expanded and dug those canals across the two different holes there just to make it a little bit more of a challenge and to change up the golf course and things like this. And also to help provide us with movement of water for when we irrigate on the golf course in different areas and things like that. But again, it's all things that takes long-term planning, and it takes a while, depending on from year to year how our budget goes, as to what we can do up there for projects. So I will leave it at that, and if anybody has any particular questions about us, we'll be glad to try to answer.
Any questions? Councilor Baswick, Deputy Mayor, Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple of things. Where do we get our water for the golf course from? Is it a well or is it from town?
There's wells there, plus, like I said, we got a couple of ponds on there so that we capture water, rainwaters and stuff like this. There's wells there, as well as, water from the town.
Okay, so that's not a burden to the town, for sure. And the good news, my colleague, Councilor Williams, might hopefully verify this, but the good news coming from the government is they're looking for a more equitable split in the funds from casinos, so that smaller areas get a fair share, I suppose, the way it is now, where the big cities get a lion's share. And there was discussion about making that more equitable to the smaller service clubs in smaller towns. So that could be something to look forward to, probably after the election, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that's my comment.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
So the space that you're requesting right now, does it provide you guys with any security? Is the fencing around it adequate? You mentioned you maybe want to put some equipment in there and do some storage. Is that area fairly secure for you already?
Yes, the current fencing that was around those tennis courts, I believe it was at least, 8 feet? Yeah, sorry, what?
12 feet.
Oh, 12 feet high, okay, I was gonna say at least 8. So yeah, it's still all there and intact. There is a gate, I noticed the other night when I looked there, over on the southeast corner of it, of course, for access for people to go in and out, which would then be closed off, because we would probably want to try to access it from the side that we have, or put a gate on the side that would make sense for us for getting equipment, things like that, in and out. So I think it would be quite sufficient. The structures that we're going to put up, we're going to want to lock them just like we do anything else, and we also will have video surveillance, which we have up at the course all around there and stuff like this, just to make sure, because it is hidden back in the corner there and in the trees, so I mean, it's not as visible. There's houses right behind the trees, but not to say that if somebody wanted to try to, wander around in there unseen, that they couldn't do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor McCoy?
Through the chair, your lease was like $1, right?
That's correct.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
And I'm so in favor of this continuing changes you're making, and it sounds great. I'm wondering if you consider things like maybe enhancing to the tennis courts and charging membership fee for tennis players or pickleball players, and other things like wintertime having cross-country skiing and stuff, and charge membership for that. Maintain it off the greens, of course, not putting in the trees and amongst the trees. It might bring you some extra water.
Yeah.
Or some extra revenue. The only other thing is, your taxes are still waived, right? You don't pay taxes.
I don't believe that there are, because it is, town property.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, the biggest thing with the courts is just the surface on those courts. The roots from the trees, of course, with it being asphalt, those roots stay very shallow and they work their way up. And it would not be safe for anybody to try to play any kind of sport on. And like I said, there's a number of trees growing out of it right now, so there needs to be some maintenance done to it first off. So I mean, at best, to utilize it for, like I said, parking carts in and things like this, you wouldn't be able to do really anything else in there. We have, as in reference to like for winter time and or do cross country skiing and stuff, that has been a conversation that we've had. A little bit of it comes down to liability with the things like that we would have to check again then, because as a club ourselves, I guess we'd have to almost, sell memberships, like you say, or something like that, for it to be a members only scenario and things like this. Otherwise, the liability aspect of that, if somebody else were on there and something happens, would fall on the club, which then becomes too risky for us as just a member organization to take on.
Just check into Devon.
Okay, I think we're off topic with providing feedback on how to run your course, but everybody else is about the tennis courts. And are there any, do you have questions about the tennis courts? Or go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the two things that, to me, that I observe is, I'm most concerned, it would be the access, the road going to the club. That's really bad. And the other thing was, to quote you, the shanty town, when you turn the corner, you see these old wrecked buildings. It's not a very pleasing approach to our golf club.
Mm-hmm.
And the road and that thing would be, to my point of view, a priority in a sense to get that really good, nice looking approach when you're going to go golfing.
Yeah.
And unless you've got a 4-wheel drive, like you say,
So
Yeah.
You don't have to, I'd rather, if we can just stay on topic here, that would really be helpful. I know the golf club is doing their best, and that was brought up. The tennis courts is our consideration tonight, and I know that we invited you here for a bit more of an update too, and I think we'll invite you back, because certainly have interested in hearing projects of the future and your ask about the tennis courts, but I know there's lots good going on up there too, so with all the programs and leagues that you have, and we're out of time for that right now, but we'd love to have you come back, and we do have that on our agenda tonight about the tennis courts, so we'll address that. And I don't know, do you have any closing statements or comments?
I guess just on that, that's what we felt too. Not a whole lot of time today. Just wanted to focus one on the courts and then a little bit about the lease, just to get both sides thinking about it. And then when we have the opportunity to meet, what we'll do is make sure that we have a full list and accounting of exit stuff that we've done there in the past that the members can remember, and like I said, a bit of a look forward as to what we got. There's lots of projects, just like everything else. We got a wish list. It's just a matter of how we are able to fund and finance that throughout the years and everything else. So we can certainly talk about that and what we see for a vision for the golf course going forward, and how to try, that's going to hopefully help enhance and bring, opportunities and people to Didsbury.
Okay. And I'm just going to say or mention what would generally happen with the lease is that we would task our administrative team with working out the details of the lease, and they'd bring it back to likely a committee after they've got a lease to present. So that certainly will be on our, I think we have leases and contracts and stuff coming up in a workshop, and I know that we can, and Ethan, you can answer this, probably that we would task our community services department to start that conversation after we have our workshop. Would that be the way you'd see it happening? Because the committee, our council committee wouldn't negotiate that. It would be you guys, our administrative team, I'm sorry, and get that together, and I'll let you answer.
Yes, that's correct. We would do some consultation between staff and council, but the actual sorting out the details and conversation would be from
between staff and the golf course, and then we bring back some recommendations and options for council to consider.
So just so that you'd know what to expect, and then we appreciate, I know we brought this up at SPC a few years ago, and we're eager to talk to the golf course, the golf club about the lease. So thanks for bringing it forward again, and we'll certainly have one of our upcoming soon-to-be workshops. And in the meantime, the tennis courts will be dealt with or addressed tonight.
Okay.
I'm not sure what'll come out of that, but council will have that discussion. And we do thank you for being here and all your support team for being here. And thanks for speaking, Brian, on behalf of your club.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
So I have a motion to Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that council thank the members of the Didsbury Golf Club and accept their presentation as information.
All right, call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. All right, now we have the minutes as amended. Item 174-23, just to have the wording reflect the same wording as in 141-23 and 142-23. So they're consistent motions on topics that are alike. So I'll just, we would just add to the end of that statement relative to the councillor, and I'll have a motion to adopt the minutes as amended unless there's any other changes or amendments to that. Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that council move to adopt the March 28, 2023 regular council meeting minutes as amended.
Comments or questions? Councillor McCoy?
Mayor, can you explain to me what, I don't get the difference in the wording. Can you say what the new one will say?
Well, just at the end of that, it would be regarding Councillor Joyce McCoy. Like there was two other motions, and all of our motions to maintain consistency when we're dealing with such issues, they're the same. They reflect the same information, so that we're not in a situation where one motion that discusses the same thing is different than the other. So that's, looking back on our March 14th minutes, they reflected that information, and so I amending to reflect that here. So I will call the vote.
I'd like a recorded vote.
All in favor? Opposed?
Didn't vote on the other side, so
Okay, that's carried. All right, now we have council reports of past 2 weeks. Councilor Moore, you want to go first?
Sure. So I attended the President's Summit and Leaders Caucus, and I have written my report, but it was written too late to be to this meeting, so it will be to the next one. I do want to point out the one thing that I was very surprised about there, that the RCMP contract, for which we just found out that we will be doing the retro pay, but not right away, they said, that contract expired while we were at the convention on March 31st. I thought it was going to be for a while, so that was a big surprise.
Can I just, it's been since 2016 that contract's been in place apparently.
Apparently. Also, on the Performance Evaluation Committee, we had a question regarding false fire alarms, and apparently I thought that everyone would be interested that they must respond, but just send one cold truck. The monitoring companies actually could maybe, they do have monitoring companies and they don't always do the screening that they could, but another municipality is looking into this and they're going to share their solutions with our fire department, so they'll get back to us on that. So we won't have anything right away. And regarding live streaming, I think Councillor Baswick would like me to say that if the internet is intermittent, that for sure the recording will be fully available the next day. And we have more information coming back on that as well. So the recording that goes to YouTube is available the following day if there's any issues with listening to the live streaming while it's live.
That would be once we get that to the council to approve.
No,
Because that's not here
whatever
yet.
they do now to.
Well, they're doing something now. But that's, PEC's dealing with something that will, well, I don't want to get into, I think
No,
we have.
it's just there's more to come.
It's about committee, so thank you for that. Remind everybody to report on the committees, their professional development. And workshops you're at the convention. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing new to report. MPC meets tomorrow, then DDAC and Didsbury Historical Society meets next week.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Attended the PEC meeting. My other committees, library and chamber, meet next week. So my updates were all the last meeting. From the previous meetings, I have no further reporting.
Right. Councillor McCoy.
As you're aware, you removed me from all external committees, etc., so I have nothing to report.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Bazic.
Thank you, Mayor. I was on the visioning committee with, and Councillor Moore answered that portion of it, so I won't repeat that. And as usual, tomorrow is the Water Commission, so I'll give you that next meeting. Thank you.
All right. My report too is we were at the Future of Municipal Government and the Spring Leaders Caucus for Alberta Municipalities, and I will have a report in the next agenda for that. It was an excellent 3 days. I think it was one of the best I've been to in the 5 years I've attended them. So lots of good information, and you can read all about it after the next meeting agenda, RCM package agenda on council reports. And other than that, the rest I will report on next week, or next meeting. Thanks everyone for that. So we can just accept those as information. It wasn't that interesting or exciting, but it was not fantastic like some of the motions we make. But it was good. Thank you for your reports. Who's going to make that? You are, yes, okay.
All right.
On the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that council accept the council reports for April 11th, 2023 as information.
All right, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. The CAO report. The CAO report for this April 11th. Anything to add to that, Ethan? Any comments, questions? Sure, a motion would be good.
I move that council accept the CAO report for April 11th, 2023 as information.
All right, call the vote. All in favor? It's carried. Thanks. So item 7.1. And unless do you have anything to add to this, administration? I think if everybody's read it, they would understand it. And we'll have the motion then, and we can take questions after that. Councillor Baswick?
I move that council grant first reading to bylaw 2023-07 tax penalties bylaw, a bylaw to establish penalties on unpaid taxes, and to refer the bylaw to the Strategic Planning Committee for review and recommendation.
All right, any comments or questions on this? All right, call the vote. All in favor? That's okay. Did you vote, Councillor McCoy?
You didn't ask for those.
Oh, no, I didn't, because I just asked if you voted. So that would be no. So opposed? Okay, that's carried. We have bylaw 2023-08, community hall rental rates. So let's have first reading and then we can have questions if there are any. Councillor? No, I was just going to get on with it. But you go ahead, yes. Thank you. I was trying to get through this one.
Thank you, Mayor. SBC met the other week to discuss a rental rate for the community hall, other known as the 5 Club. All of the committee consensuously decided that we should have a new rate for the 5 Club just due to size and amenities that it offers. So as you can see on page 75, the committee recommends a $30 hour rate for local, $200 hour rate, $200 day rate for local, and $150 for half day local.
All right, so we have the motion for the first reading.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to grant first reading to bylaw 2023-08, community hall rental rates.
All right, no other questions? Councillor Deputy Mayor Engel and then Councillor Bazak.
So with the change in this bylaw, we had some people that are under contract at the moment. Are we retaining, like we're honoring those contracts at that pricing?
Yes, the committee decided to honor the set contracts already in place.
Thank you.
Councillor McCoy? I know Councillor Bazak was next, and then Councillor McCoy.
Okay, thank you. I'm just wondering, is there a dramatic difference in the rates as opposed to what they were, or are these the same?
Pretty much the same.
Thank you.
I would have liked to have seen the old rates and the new rates presented rather than having to go look them up. It would have been nice. It's just a comment to you. And also, if we're going to honor contracts, there should be something in the bylaw that states that we're honoring this contract that expires here and it's for this much or something. Otherwise, the information could be lost and that contract could stand forever.
You want to address that, look for you want an answer, a response to that, why that didn't happen?
No, I was asking you.
I appreciate that. But you'd like a response from the committee to that, I'm thinking, because I can't answer it.
Yes.
So can you respond to that?
So I just want to make it clear, you're asking for the contract to be honored and to have that written, included in the bylaw?
I guess I'm saying it doesn't necessarily have to be in the bylaw, but it should be maybe in Schedule A and include an expiry date as well as the value of what they're going to pay until that expiry date.
So right now, we don't have an expiry date. We did ask in the committee by consensus is also recommended that the process to determine the future use of the 5 Club be expedited. Sorry, to sped up the process. And that answers your question.
Okay, please do.
Through the chair to answer Councillor McCoy's questions. So we have agreements already in place with people who have rented the building prior to tonight's meeting. So we know who will be honored at the previous rate, and any rentals that come in once council approves the bylaw fully, any rentals that come in will be at the new rate. So that kind of covers all of the contracts. And then in terms of previous rates, there weren't any because this is a new building to us. We had previously temporarily used the train station rates, so there is a bit of adjustment between the train station rates versus the rates that are being presented this evening that the committee is recommending to you.
Through the chair, just for clarity, so the people that had an agreement with the 5 Club, the club itself, that agreement carries on ad infinitum?
Through the chair, no, it doesn't. So the agreements that we're talking about end the middle of June, And then we have 2 rentals after that, one at the end of July and one at the beginning of September. And after that, there's nothing else on the books.
Thank you. That answers my question. Thanks. Sorry, Councilwoman.
So I see that you wanted to get them in place quickly, and I appreciate that. And I'll ask the questions about the rates first, and that would be, are there cleanup rates or setup rates, or do we do things like that? Were those discussed? Like if a group doesn't want to set up or clean up, where does that fall? I'm giving the committee the first chance to tell me if they discussed that. If they didn't, I'll defer. You want to defer to Nicole to answer that?
Thank you. We do have standard setup and cleanup rates that are encompassed in our other recreation bylaw, so it covers all of our facilities like the train station, the MPR, which is a $75 an hour charge that a group can pay to the town to have us take care of those things for them. This isn't included in the bylaw, but now that you've mentioned it, probably should be. Does that answer your question?
Yes. It does. So I would suggest that we include that in the rates then? Because a group wouldn't know that otherwise, if it's not in their agreement. So since we're on first reading, we could just add that $75 an hour for setup and cleanup? Well, no. We'd make them. No, we want to set up. And I had... Are there special rates? So if we have, and I understand there's a group in there right now that is repetitive, and is there a special rate? Because I know in some of our cases, if they rent it into perpetuity, they can get a special rate, or if it's a special consideration or request. So is there anything outside of this that would happen as per rates? Did you want to try that, Councillor Moore?
Well, as Councillor Williams stated, I think Council made it clear that they wanted to address what's going to happen with the building. So anything cannot be in perpetuity if we're going to do something different with the building. So the current, as administration said, the current contracts that they have with the people that are in there on a regular basis end in the middle of June. And so we don't have anything, but we do expect that council will make decisions about the building.
Ethan? Thanks for that, Councillor Moore.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just further to that, the groups that you're referring to that have been like regular users, they're paying the temporary rates currently. So we'll honor those for them until the end of the term. And then once council has done some visioning on the future of that facility, then we would have conversations with those groups to gauge their interest for going forward, depending on what you decide.
Okay. Thanks for that. Councillor McCoy?
Through the chair, I guess, I'm not sure who's going to answer, but there used to be a rate if you wanted the downstairs as well as the upstairs. There was one rate for just the upstairs, and then if you wanted your people to be able to go down there and play pool or shuffleboard or whatever, there was an additional fee to use that space. Is that still going to happen?
Did you guys, committee, want to answer this?
So the rate covers the whole building.
Okay.
Yeah. That is why it's like $10 higher than the train station, because of the downstairs and the softball and pool table and all that.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, any further questions? Then we can move on if everybody votes for the bylaw, the first reading as amended.
Yes.
All right, so would you accept that?
I accept that friendly
Okay.
amendment.
And the amendment being the $75 setup and cleanup fee.
I
Has he got you scared? It's optional if they want to set up themselves. Yes. It is optional. Put that in the agreement, please. Okay, I'll call a vote as amended. All in favor? That's carried. Second reading?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to grant second reading to bylaw 2023-08, community hall rental rates.
I would just like to ask that administration explain that they have a contract that covers if there's damage and that sort of thing, so that people know that this isn't it, and, you know, there are other consequences if people have made a big mess or something. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that's covered.
So the user would sign a document, so go ahead, Nicole, if Ethan will.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, so our use agreement, which any renter would have to sign off on, and actually ask them to initial all of those areas. So we are covered that, and there is a penalty that would be applied to them if they didn't. We take a damage deposit. So.
Thanks for that. All right, and just while we're in second reading, you said that committee's recommending the process be expedited. Is there a reason, and I'm talking about it now because we're in the readings and I can't talk about it later, is there a reason you didn't make a motion that we make that motion to have it expedited? Is the recommendation strong enough, or would either of you like to answer that?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I was actually under my consent too that we were going to make the motion. Okay. Yep. And I was going to make that motion after we finish with the bylaw. It'd be a separate motion.
We'll do that then. And so second reading, I will call a vote unless there's other comments.
Did we get a motion for the second reading?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that's carried. Third reading?
Thank you, Mayor. I move to grant unanimous consent to proceed to a third reading of bylaw 2023-08, community hall rental rates.
All right, all in favor? That's carried unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to grant third and final reading to bylaw 2023-08, community hall rental rates.
I will call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. All right, and then we'll have that.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the Strategic Planning Committee recommends that the process to determine the future use of the community hall, formerly known as the 50 Club, be expedited.
That you recommend to council, because we can't vote for you guys.
Sorry, I should ask that.
It's okay. Any questions or comments on that? Do you have a example of what expedited means? Like timelines?
ASAP.
Okay. I'm thinking before June, so because June is kind of when the rentals run out. And I think there's something in the works for a workshop on that, so. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Baswick.
Do you have an explanation of ASD?
As soon as possible.
Are you mocking my question?
I think so. I think it's almost the same as expedited. They both don't mean anything. There's no end. Right? They just mean, you know what I mean? They're up there. ASAP when?
No, I said May.
When, right?
I said May. Well, so it's dealt with in June.
If you need a date on it, I don't know.
Are you guys are listening? May and June's kind of in your heads now. I would be fine putting a May on it, but that would be up to the committee. And if you're fine with your motion the way you are.
I'm okay with putting a date if,
Sorry, I'm okay with putting a date on the motion, if that doesn't provide any extra stress on administration.
It's coming pretty soon, so I don't think we need a lot of that will be based on some calendar availability of council and things like that, but it's
Okay, we said expedited, ASAP, and you now just said pretty soon.
I think all we need
I think we need that we want this expedited dealt with by June. Now might just, hasn't got a date, it's got a month. Would you accept that?
I accept that.
By June? I'm happy with that, are you? And I will call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. We have the bylaw number 2023-09, the planning and business license rates and fees amendment. This wasn't at your committee. I believe it just came because planning. Did you want to speak to that, Ethan?
Yeah, I can speak to that. We are recently exploring with some potential opportunities from some developers for some things that we realized as we were looking at our development fees, that we were lacking something that properly kind of captured this one type of thing, and so we're bringing this to kind of better enhance our fee structure for development.
Questions from anyone?
Thank you, Mayor. Just for conversation's sake, the difference between then and now, like one that just jumped out at me was $7,500 for an area structure plan for up to 65 hectares. Was it less than that, and this is the new rate?
Oh, with your pleasure, Mayor. Thank you for the question. Sorry, the only addition or change to this is just in the blue there, just to add the category of high density residential development, like a large, for example, hypothetically, like a large apartment complex.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for that. All kinds of activity in chambers tonight. Thanks, Luana, for that. And are there any comparisons in our region for things like this? And that probably was done, I'm thinking, that there was comparison rate done.
Yes, we did. We actually looked at a lot of comparisons, and which tend to be a lot higher than that, which we thought was a little bit on the high side. And we thought, especially we don't really get these a lot, and we don't want to be too cost prohibitive on that front. So we were trying to be a bit more friendly while still being fair to the administrative resources that support these things. And so we tried to come up with something that we thought was still fair, but not too onerous, like which tend to be some of the going rates.
Right. Did you want to make the first motion for the first reading, or you have another question? Okay.
Just another question. I appreciate the fact that administration is doing what they're doing, because I've always liked a made in Didsbury rule of any kind. And I don't care, don't be flippant about it. I'm not concerned about Three Hills or someone else, what their rates are. So I'm grateful that you've taken that into consideration. You're not parroting another community. We have a made in Didsbury rate, and that's what I always strive for. So thank you for that.
All right. Please, sure, go ahead with the first reading.
I move that council grant first reading to bylaw 2023-09 to amend planning and business license rates and fees bylaw 2023-01.
All right, any questions or comments? Call the vote, all in favor? That's carried. Go ahead.
And I move that council grant second reading to bylaw 2023-09 to amend planning and business license rates and fees bylaw 2023-01.
All right. Seeing no hands, I'll call the vote. All in favor, second reading, that's carried.
I move that council give unanimous consent to proceed to a third reading of bylaw 2023-09 to amend planning and business license rates and fees bylaw 2023-01.
Call the vote, all in favor? Opposed? So that's not unanimous. And we'll
Ends here.
proceed that to next meeting. All right. We have the 2022, Councilor McCoy?
I just was curious, you didn't want to understand why I voted against it?
No, because we don't get to debate a unanimous vote, so you could have spoken at the second reading is when you should have spoken. Yeah. So. We have the 2022 audited financial statements that we heard tonight, and if there's any outstanding questions for Amanda, but I think we will have any questions first, I believe, because we can accept them as information, but we need to accept the audited statement as presented. And maybe we can do two motions. The audited financial statement and Amanda's report, or do we have to do them as one, Ethan? So we'll just have any outstanding questions to Amanda first then. There are no more questions to Amanda, so I have the motion to accept. Councilor Ringo, or Deputy?
I move the council approve the 2022 audited financial statements as presented.
All right, there were no questions before, so I will call the vote. With my microphone on this time, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And we have the no we don't, we have the Didsbury Golf Club request. So I would like to have comments and questions first on this. Because are there any questions besides mine? Please go ahead first. Show of hands, or because in our lease, and maybe someone, Ethan, I don't know who can answer this, and I think we were going to have that discussion about leases coming up, or at some point, leases and contracts. But when any of these changes are made, so when the tennis courts became part of that use, was our lease amended at that point? Like the initial storage cart and giving up of the tennis courts, the portion that they're using right now? There, in my opinion, should have been an amendment to that, and maybe I'm incorrect. So would that, oh, you want to answer that? I just saw her shake her head, so
Yeah.
go ahead
No.
though.
No.
And with that then, are any changes on the lease property included in that lease? Because there's been a major number of very impressive changes up there, and of course I think we all appreciate that, but I think our leases should reflect that. And maybe when we get to the lease discussion that apparently is going to proceed, that all of those changes up there should be captured into that lease. And because I've watched them over the years, and I've just watched them as a golfer, and I think they're very impressive and very appreciated we are to that. But I think at this point, if we approve this use of the tennis courts, that I would think that we would bring it back for that amendment to the lease, just to get on the right track with those things, because this lease is not up till 2027, so I can't see the lease being changed until closer to that period of time. So at this point, to capture any requests and amendments to the lease, I think is important.
So sometimes, and I don't have the lease right in front of me, and I haven't looked at it recently, but sometimes these types of documents allow for improvements to be made or changes to be made as approved by council. And so it wouldn't, because the lease itself allows for that, it wouldn't need an amendment to the lease every time a change is made to the, as long as there was, and we can certainly track any approvals that council gave for those things. But, so I'm just trying to understand, is the thinking that potentially any change or upgrade that's made to the golf course would then be amended into the lease?
Well, yeah, I guess there's been some significant major changes to that property, and I think they're wonderful, and at the same time, and I'm just going to use the canal as an example. So when the canal did go in there, there's a lot of legalities to change in water flow and putting in waterways, and I don't know what happened there, but that would be certainly at the town's discretion should that major change be made to the landscape of the golf course and any change in landscape and their trees. Absolutely, they're certainly right to flag those, that the trees are probably getting to a point where they need some attention and work, but major change in the landscape again. And when you're you hold the lease as a municipality, the municipality needs to be aware, and I do believe we need to track those things because that would be important in our process of land that is municipal land and the changes that are made to it. And if that means they're going to add more storage carts or where they're adding new portions, because the tennis courts weren't part of that lease when it was entered into. And so if the tennis courts are part of the lease now, I think we just acknowledge that they're part of the lease. I think that's just due diligence on a lease that we hold with our very appreciated groups. Councillor McCoy?
I'm just curious, it might not have changed the contract, but considering that they pay a whopping $1, I don't think that we need to be persnickety about it, and we should be careful how much we do for them. But the changes that have happened over 30 years, they've happened forever, right? And there has never been a change to that contract. So I don't see this close to the end of a contract that it would require all these extra things. I understand your concern about the water and them changing that, but the original ones were never brought to the town's attention either. So I just think it might be a little overbearing. Like, I think we should look at those things for the future contract and not mess with this one maybe. It's just my personal thoughts.
Thank you, Mayor. I think under normal circumstances, this could be unusual. I think Councillor Moore could help me out in this one. Most of these type of things are included clause something to the effect of leasehold improvements. So if you're the leasee and you want to knock a wall out or wherever, you do it at your expense and you make the changes accordingly that fit with a certain code. And I would be surprised if that, of course, is like how many years ago, 85, maybe it wasn't included in the original lease, the fact that leasehold improvements would be the responsibility of the golf course. My next question, if I may, is that I'm assuming that they're going to take care of the cleanup of this tennis court in order so they can use it, and that it wouldn't be an expense to us, or maybe it will be. I don't know what's going to happen there. No? Okay, that's good. No expense to us.
No time like the present, and I think if we're involved in a lease, I think we've been very, when you're leasing it, it's not a contract, it's a lease, and it's municipal property. So I would like to suggest that we task the our administrative team to review the lease and bring back a recommendation about the use of the tennis courts. And I know it's sitting here in front of us, but I think it's important that we have all the information in front of us and the facts. And I appreciated the presentation, and maybe that we have the clauses that are relative to that, relative to changes in the lease. Maybe they are included, maybe they're not. I don't know. I know I read it in 2002 or 2000, but I don't remember. I didn't memorize it. So would someone entertain a motion just to have our administrative team review the lease and bring back a recommendation about that? Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I don't see the problem with this golf course taking this over. It's in disrepair, we're not taking care of it, and nobody is using it. I don't mind if we add it on the lease that we've allowed them to use this space, but we as a town have obviously done nothing. It sits on their property, and we haven't kept it up. So it's unusable, and I don't think that we should delay them using it. If we approve the motion, we can note on the lease that we've given them the permission to use it.
That's what I asked for the first time, was just acknowledgement of changes to the lease. And it wouldn't have been in the lease because the town ran the tennis courts at the time. It's on town property, and the town operated the tennis courts, and the Elks, I think, even operated them at one point. So that's what I'm asking, is just a reflection going forward of any changes to the lease that are captured, and they move forward with that. And I don't think it's not changing the lease, it's asking to acknowledge a change in the lease and use of what's up there, of land that wasn't traditionally or historically in the lease. Councillor Moore?
Actually, Councillor McCoy first.
Councillor McCoy?
Thank you. I wonder if just a motion stating that they have council's permission to use that would suffice. Because once you touch a lease, you've got to have it go through legal, and there's so many things you have to do. And I think if we motion that they can use it, that's as empowering as it is being on the lease. And at this point, when you look at those pictures, if we say no to them, then we better get up there and clean those up, right? Whereas if we say yes, it's not being used anyways, and they can move forward with it right away.
Deputy Mayor, Councillor Moore?
I think maybe this might be something that might include what everybody's saying. I don't think we should touch the lease itself, but I think an agreement could be made, because this isn't part of their lease now, that from now until their lease is renegotiated, that they can use and care for the tennis courts, and just leave it at that it's because it isn't part of it now. So rather than opening up the lease when it's so near the end, if we could just have that agreement and have them sign it, then we could move forward with this right now.
I appreciate that. 4 years is a lot to me, because I'll be 67 in 4 years, so that's a lot of years to me. It's not just around the corner we're doing this lease. So I appreciate that. Would you make a motion to that effect? Because I think it's important.
I move that council directs administration to create an agreement with the golf club to use the tennis courts to the end of their lease, with an agreement to look after them and do the necessary repairs. No?
Thanks for that.
Do you want?
Repairs to them, so.
Okay, just whatever is necessary to use them.
Deputy Marriott?
But they just look after them. How about that?
Yeah, they're going to use it for storage, so
Yeah.
they just to use it for their needs.
Yeah.
Ethan?
If I could, Councillor Moore, maybe just to approve an agreement to allow for the use and responsibility of the old tennis courts.
Many hands make light work.
I appreciate that.
I would appreciate the amendment, thank you.
Okay, you'll accept that amendment. Any other comments? Call the vote, all in favor. Councillor Baswick had to get a bag of chips, apparently. Did you want us to be just quiet while you open them then?
That's not really quiet. Turn your mic off. What are you doing that?
All right, item 9.1. We're getting to our business. Rosebud Health Foundation Spring Fling. And as this is a very important fundraising event for the Rosebud Health Foundation, I'll have a motion. I don't know, do you want to discuss this first, how you'd like to see it go? Because we could, they're really looking for attendance. I was speaking to a couple of their members, their board, committee members today, and they really need attendance at this event. So if council, they are accepting donations and prizes, but they're also interested in getting people at the table. I'd like to ask Ethan if, while everybody's thinking about going, if we could get this distributed to the staff in our municipality, in our employ, and hopefully that they'll see the value in supporting it as well. Very worthy cause, our hospital, as we see new construction down there as well at the same time, that they'll be somehow part of, I believe, in furnishing it or supplying product. So is there a motion that someone would like to make about this? Would you like to go? Would we like to donate? Councillor McCoy?
Personally, if we're not going to fund staff, I don't think we should fund each other. I think that $75 is, if you're passionate about Rosebud Health, then like I'm going. So like I don't think it's a taxpayer thing that we should be funding.
I think it's mentioned it, or maybe it's not. Somebody mentioned it to me. We do this for the Mountain View Seniors Housing Foundation as well. And we did it for the regimental ball. So it's just really a matter of the motion. You can show your vote in the motion if there's a motion to be made. Who would like to make one? Councillor Baswick.
Thank you, Mayor. I, at one time, was on the Rosebud Foundation Committee, and I know they do really good things for our community. Raise an awful lot of money for specialized equipment, both for anybody, and it's really helped our hospital. So I'm in favor of if we're able to do the gold sponsorship, which in the tune of $800 to help them out, it's just going to go to benefit our community and this hospital big time. Yeah.
Great. You want to make that motion? And then there can be more discussion. In the form of a gold sponsor?
I would move that council purchase a gold package sponsorship to the tune of $800 to support the Rosebud Health Foundation.
Great. Thanks for that. Comments? Councillor McCoy?
Is it possible that the gold welcome package sponsor or whatever that would allow for people such as yourself to go and not have to go?
Well, there's eight seats, so we'd have asked council. I'm actually on the board, so I get to go anyway. At the same time, we'd ask, once, if this is approved, then we would ask our person to send it out to people, and then I think we'd go to the administrative team subsequent to that, or that sort of flow. So if anybody, yeah, I think that would be how it would, you then correct me if I'm wrong, but we'd ask Sarah Likely to get the word out, see how many would like to come, and then from there, move it towards other members of our municipality to speak for. All right, any other questions or comments? I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That's carried. Thanks for that motion. They'll be very happy with that. We have item 9.2, appointment to the Didsbury Municipal Library Board. Deputy Mayor.
I move the council appoint David McWhinney as trustee to the Didsbury Library Board for one term of 3 years.
All right, comments, questions? Just thank you to David for his continued interest. He's been on there a while and does great work as the whole board does. I will call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. And the Alberta Municipalities resolutions. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to task Policy and Governance Committee with exploring developing any potential resolutions for recommendation to Council to be considered for submission at the Alberta Municipalities Fall Convention.
All right, comments or questions? Rather than faltering around, Councillor Moore.
Oh, no, I'm just happy with it.
No, I know. Rather than all them wondering and waiting, so I'll call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, we have correspondence and information from the town of Barrhead and the city of Red Deer. Councillor Moore.
I move to accept the correspondence items presented as information.
All right, any questions or comments on those? Call the vote. All in favor? That's carried. And we have council highlights. Item 11. Councillor Morris started with you earlier. I think it was.
Woohoo! I get to say the audited financial statement. Really detailed and well done. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to say the Rosebud Health Foundation Spring Fling. Unfortunately, I'll be unable to attend that day. I would love to attend, but
They're taking other donations if you'd like to. Thanks for that, Deputy Mayor.
My highlight would be the appointment of David McWhinney to the library board, a valued community person that stands up and donates his time willingly and does a really good job on that board. So thanks, David.
Great. Councillor McCoy.
I'm not sure I have anything to add. I think you've hit everything.
It was a small agenda. Yes. Councillor Baswick.
You and I are not going to win on this one because there's nothing left for us, right? But I guess the golf club request was a fair one, and it's something we have to look after in support of our community, and so that would be my interest, yes.
Well, I have to say, Alberta municipalities, it's time they got a few resolutions from us. I think we've seconded a few, but we're certainly interested in getting a couple up there in front of them and seeing how they can get moved through the system. So with that, I am going to have a gallery question period. And last meeting, I asked, and I think I continue to ask, that when people get up and speak, it's mutually respectful, and not attacking our staff and not mocking our staff. And I continue to insist on that. So, Mr. Van Vliet, I'll ask you not to speak tonight because of that, because I don't see that there's respect when you come up to the mic, and our staff are constantly in your sight of of that attack and disrespect. So for tonight, if there's anyone else that would like to ask a question or make a comment, you're welcome to come to the mic. And as always, we'll ask for respectful engagement. And maybe even moving forward, let's have solutions rather than disrespect and insults sometimes. And I think that maybe moving forward in our question period moving forward, we'll ask for solutions rather than criticism of our staff. Of course, you're always welcome to criticize public figures such as council members. We understand that. But I think our staff have certainly taken the brunt for a long time. So I'm going to leave it at that. And if anyone would like to speak, something, I don't see anybody though. So I will thank everybody for being here. I appreciate new faces and same faces. And somebody has not a Town of Didsbury hat on in the back, but I won't say what it is. And I'll call for the meeting to go to close at 8:05. Councillor Bowser.
I'll move that council goes into closed meeting at 8:05.
Call the vote. All in favor? Carried. All right, thanks everyone. 2 minutes.
because I'll have to PGC early.
Yeah, we have to have them submitted by May 31st, but, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so, well, we're waiting for Lisa, but we make the motion to come out of camera before Lisa gets the camera going? I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah. To come out of camera. All in favor? At 9:47. Had it closed, whatever it's called. Are you ready? No, Lisa's not ready.
It is recorded in
I have no picture, but
oh,
we can hear you.
Is the recording at least on?
What's that?
Is the recording on?
There's no other picture.
Right, that might have been acceptable in the 80s or 70s, but in 2020, it's not acceptable.
I identify as the 70s, okay?
I saw this lady slender. So she was a big lady, and she did this TikTok where she said, I identify as being slim, and that's her.
For people that are identified as being rich, I am. Because you believe it.
Well, it's probably a good
Are we ready?
Like my dad used to always say, elephants eat birds.
We need motion for item 13.1. Ethan, can you just remind us?
Yes, yeah, a motion to respond to the development proposal as discussed.
Yes,
Deputy Mayor
I forwarded.
will make that motion. So for the development proposal as discussed, all in favor? That's carried. ICF renegotiation?
I second
That we send the letter to the county as discussed. That the mayor, on behalf of council, send the letter to the county as discussed.
Yes.
Sure.
it. Dorothy made.
Counselor Moore?
All right.
All in favor? That's carried. Item 13.3, land development.
To approve the proposal as discussed.
Councilor
To
McCoy.
approve the land purchase proposal as discussed.
Land purchase proposal.
Counselor McCoy. All in favor? That's carried. And the bulk water item,
That would be.
it's to send to the SPC.
Yeah, it's gotta go back to the SPCA.
Counselor Williams to send the bulk water issue to SPC and come back to council with a recommendation. All in favor? That's carried. And
Withdraw from the meeting. Oh, no.
No, one more.
do we have a motion?
Yeah, that the mayor to respond. That the mayor respond to the complainants as discussed.
Okay.
I think we just
That's not
said
right.
we have to follow.
No, because this one's different.
Okay.
It's not a sanction.
Because no actions are being taken.
Okay. All in favor? Who made that? Councilor Baswick did.
Yeah.
Councilor Baswick, all in favor?
Really working on this out here.
That's carried. And a motion to adjourn at 9:50.
Oh, Ethan had his hand.
He shouldn't get to do the adjournment. He's the youngest and he should stay the latest. Us older people should make those. All in favor?
Nobody cared.
That's carried.